This is LibreQuest. My name is Matt. It is the 16th of February, 2020. Today is a special episode. It features an interview with a gentleman by the name of Alan Sanderson. He is a doctor, he is a musician, and he is a Linux user. So without any further delay, this is the interview. Hello, Alan. Thank you for making yourself available for an interview today. Could you start by introducing yourself and tell the listeners a bit about yourself?
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me on the podcast. So my name is Alan Sanderson. I'm a hobby musician and singer-songwriter. I've been involved in writing music since I was a teenager, played in a garage band. When I was in my college years, I got into digital recording and did a Linux migration through the early 2000s. And just last December, I finished an album that I've been working on since 2005. So almost 15 years of work on this album. So in 2004, I started medical school. And medical school is just incredibly busy. And I started the album in the summer between my first and second years of medical school. And I managed to get 3 songs recorded. And then the workload just got too huge. And also, my wife and I had a lot of kids. And just every 2 years, we had another one. And so when I wasn't busy at work, I was putting in 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks through residency. And when I wasn't doing that, I was at home with this, wall-to-wall children. And there just wasn't a lot of free time. But 5 years ago, I moved, so 2015, I moved to a different job and just better work-life balance, and I decided it was time to get back into the music, and I decided to finish that album that I had never finished.
The title track of your album is Lost and Found. Can you tell me what inspired you to write the song?
Yeah, so that started as kind of a teenage angst poem. I was about 15, 16 years old when I wrote the first verse. And it's about sort of losing your way through adolescence and kind of not knowing who you are or who you even want to be. I think anyone who's been a teenager can sort of relate to that feeling. And then just sort of realizing that I can choose who I am, and I want to be who I always was. The rest of the song came to me later. I was serving as a missionary for my church when I was 19 through 21. And the second verse came to me in the shower one day when I was on my mission. I was in England. And it's about sort of finding yourself in serving others. And it's not about, who you are and how you're lost in this world. It's really about who can you go find. And so that's what the song means to me.
When we lose ourselves in others, that's when we find ourselves. When we lose ourselves in others, that's when we find ourselves.
So I wanted to ask you, I brought the show in today with the track Alpha from your album Lost and Found. Can you talk a little bit about the process, both instrumental and software, that you used in the production of this track?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite tracks on the album. So that's an old song. A lot of these songs are songs that were from my old high school days, songs I wrote then. And this song actually was a collaboration with one of my good friends from high school named Jim Ash. And he wrote this little keyboard song that was kind of this little throwaway song, and I really liked it and started improvising this guitar part to it, and he got really excited about it. We went to the tape deck. This is back in the 90s, right? So we went to the cassette tape and did this multi-track thing, which, was super exciting, but the recording was terrible. And when I listen to it now, my guitar was out of tune. There's a bunch of tape hiss and all these kinds of things. And so it was around 2012. I was at the tail end of my medical residency, and I was at this garage sale, and I found this little 49-key MIDI controller for $10. And I'm not much of a keyboardist, but I just couldn't pass it up. So I brought it home, and I realized I don't even have a way to use this thing. So I did some web searching, and I found LMMS, which looked like a good tool to use for this. So I plugged it in and figured it out, how to get sounds out of the keyboard into the computer, and so Alpha was programmed on LMMS. All of the synth tracks are programmed on that software, and I just love that program. That program more than anything else is what got me back into music when my residency was over.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to throw in there. I've actually I have some experience with LMMS, and I can certainly verify that is an exceptional piece of software.
Yeah. What I loved about it the most when I first started using it was the triple oscillator synth, because you can shape your own sounds. You can make your own. I mean, it presents you with this sort of boring sine wave in octaves, but you can shape that however you want. And I love the old analog synth recordings, like the switched on Bach. I used to have the LP of that. I'm really dating myself now. I used to listen to records when I was a kid, but but the old switched on Bach recordings, I just loved the synthesizer sounds in that. And I was also a big Kraftwerk fan. I love the old synth sounds. And so being able to have this software tool where I could shape the sound of this virtual synthesizer, I just love that. So all the sounds in Alpha were shaped by ear using the triple oscillator synthesizer.
That's beautiful. So a link to your website is going to be included in the show notes for this episode. And on your website, you provide lyrics, tablature, and other source files. Can you talk a bit about the material you've provided for download and why you feel it's important that you make these source files available?
Yeah. So I'm not a coder. I mean, I'll write little scripts on my machine to do stuff, but if you ask me to write any, non-trivial piece of software, it's not in my skill set. But I really appreciate the people that do, and I really believe in the free software development model. And I've been using free software now for 20 years. I remember being introduced to the GIMP when I was in undergrad, and I was just amazed that this super powerful piece of software was free, absolutely free. And not just free as in beer, but free as in speech. And so I went and read the Free Software Foundation and the GNU Manifesto and learned sort of the philosophical background of the free software movement. And I just think it's just an amazing way to develop software. And I'm so grateful for the developers who do that. So with my music, I wanted to contribute something back to this community that shares things so openly. And so whenever I post a song on my website, I like to include the source files, like the LMMS file or the MIDI files, and I will write up a guitar tablature so that if anyone wants to learn how to play this song, you've got the source code here and you can compile it from source if you want to. And I think as a musician that uses free software, it's really important to me that I be open with my music. I don't keep my music behind a paywall. it's free. It will always be free. Not that it's. I consider my music to be incredibly valuable to me. This is my baby, my creation. My soul that I'm sharing with whoever wants to listen to it. And so I don't think my music is throwaway, but I'm not trying to monetize it. This is my hobby. But I feel it's important to have it out there in a way that's free, because the software that I use to make it is free that way.
Yeah, that's great. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's important that I would say as far as the ideology of free software, I think it's very important for the future. Really, I think it's important that we have free software and free licenses, and the same with music. I'm right there with you on the not monetizing, and but still reserving the right to sell it if I want to. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a track.
Sorry, one more thing. So back when I was in undergrad, the Creative Commons licenses came out. This would have been about 2003-ish, I think. And that was like a watershed moment for someone like me. That I consider myself an artist, a musical artist, and having this knowledge of the free software community, I wanted to contribute to that, and Creative Commons became the vehicle for me to be able to do that. And so I prefer the attribution license. It's the equivalent to like a BSD license. So almost all of my songs on my website are free to download, they're free to share, they're free to make derivative works, and they're free to use in a commercial medium if you want to. And all I ask is that you give attribution back to me and say, yeah, that was his song.
You definitely use the most permissive version of Creative Commons for sure.
Well, I could have done it in public domain, but I do want credit for my work, right?
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about the track titled Something Wrong. And this is a very emotional track. And I was wondering if you could talk about the track and maybe the meaning behind the lyrics.
Yeah. This is the first track that I recorded back in 2005 for the album. And it's a song that dates back to, I think, about 1997. It's from an experience that I had my senior year of high school. That was a rough year. I wrote I wrote up this whole story in a blog post that I can give you the link to. But the short version is this. I had to move to a new high school for my senior year. And I left behind my garage band. I left behind a small town and a small school where I kind of had a name for myself. And I moved to this massive school in a bigger city. My class size was over 1,000. And I just was a nobody overnight. And it was awful. And one day in the lunchroom, this girl came up to me and talked to me and was nice to me. And it just really changed the course of my year, and was super important just to know that I had a friend. And she became my friend. And so the song is about what happened later in the year when she had a mental breakdown. She landed in the psych ward of the hospital with this psychotic mania. And nobody would tell me where she was. And she just disappeared and was gone. And I had no idea where to even look for her. And the chorus of the song asks the question, is there something wrong with Allison? Or is there something wrong with me? And in that situation, as soon as I found out that she had this mental breakdown, and then I blamed myself, thinking, am I responsible for this? Did I cause this to happen to her somehow? And of course, I wasn't to blame for it, but I was an 18-year-old, self-absorbed kid, and I really worried about that at the time. And so, yeah, that song was about kind of the raw emotion of of having a friend that you really care about, that did something important for you in your life, and then they are struggling and suffering in a way that you can't help them, and you're isolated from other people over it. And what I hope for that song is, I hope that people can relate to the experience of knowing somebody that has a mental illness, because mental illness is so prevalent out in society. And it's hard. It's hard for the person experiencing the illness, and it's hard for the person who's sort of left behind and can't understand their behavior. And I just have a lot of tender feelings about that song. But I think there's too much stigma of mental illness in our culture, right? Even within medicine, among doctors, mental illnesses are somehow not legit, you know. But I think that's not fair. They're brain diseases like other illnesses, and I think there's no reason to be ashamed of a diagnosis of depression any more than a diagnosis of, hypertension or diabetes, right?
Is there something wrong with Allison? Or is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with Allison? Or is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, all my music you can find on alansanderson.band. As far as I know, there's nobody selling my music, but the license that I use doesn't prevent you from doing that. So if you're a music distributor, if you make, television spots or whatever, you can use my music freely. And if you reach out to me, I can give you instrumental versions, whatever you want. Just use my music. It's yours.
Awesome. So if you're interested in finding out more about Alan's music, you can visit alansanderson.band.
Matt, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Alan, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. So again, I want to thank Alan for being a guest here on LibreQuest. And also I have added a link to the blog post that he mentioned in the interview, as well as I have added a new section on LibreQuest.org under episodes for where you can find the show. And I also wanted to mention that the podcast has an RSS feed now, which is also linked there in where to find the show there on LibreQuest.org. So thank you for being a listener. And if you want to support the podcast, you can on Subscribestar and on Patreon. And until next time, this has been LibreQuest.